Hi everyone, welcome to another podcast with an investor. And this time I've got a true investor in the sense that I've got Venk, and he is true in the sense that he has built his company in the US, he has exited, sold, came back to India, started his own fund, started backing up a lot of founders. And he's also a community builder in the sense that he is the current president of TI Bangalore, and we will talk a lot about startup ecosystem, India's decade, and a lot of other interesting aspects about his venture and his life. So, without further delay, let me introduce Venk. Venk, hi, thanks for taking out time.
Go ahead.
Thank you. So, Venk, we will go back. I think you went to US and then you started your venture. Just give us more idea in terms of what happened, how everything got built up.
Yeah. So, see, basically, I graduated from BITS Pilani, and then after that, I worked at ORG Systems. In those days, ORG was a big company, mostly in software engineering, and then joined Wipro in Bangalore. And in those days, if you look at the early 90s, like there was a big flux of people going to the US, especially with companies like Infosys and Wipro and others starting their IT services
Right,
company.
right.
Right? But I actually went to US. I wanted to do my master's from NYIT, but one of the things which happened for me was once I reached there, I had the opportunity to meet somebody, and he's an Italian guy. He was running a small shop which was mainly building trading systems for US trades, right? So basically, there was not an online system in those days. That was one of the first systems, and I was very enamored by what they were building. But it just happened that they were building it in using a technology called Sybase, which was in those days just getting. And pretty soon, Sybase had become like the de facto standard for databases in Wall Street.
Wow.
So around that time, I had the opportunity to work in Sybase, and the company was building a trading system. It is still, I think, one of the biggest one. It's called BRAS, Brokerage Real Time Access Software System or something. And that system, they were building an online trading system using client server architecture. Client server architecture is an architecture which was just starting to evolve, especially with the mainframes giving way to the mini computers and Sun Microsystems and those kind of stuff, right? So I had the opportunity to work in that system. So that gave me a lot of domain knowledge in financial services, especially trading, right? So then I had the opportunity to work from there. I learned a lot there, especially on software and building online systems, mission critical systems. And then I had the opportunity to work at I think I worked for a company called RAM Mobile Data, which is mainly in the wireless data. And
Right.
that's one of the first companies which was getting into wireless based communication. That was one of the first companies which were allowing people to communicate using wireless, right? This was in early 90s, I
Got
would
it.
say 91, right? So that gave me some new idea, technology. I uh, became manager of the software development group. From there, I had the opportunity to go to JP Morgan, and that is on Wall Street. JP Morgan, one of the biggest offices is on 60 Wall,
Right.
and I was assigned to that group called Emerging Markets Group. And again, because of my Sybase knowledge, it led me to learn about how emerging market technologies are being developed by a company like JP Morgan. And it was very techno. If you look at JP Morgan or a Goldman Sachs or any of these companies, they were very heavily focused on technology
Right.
built
Even in during
applications
those days.
during those days. And that is the
Right.
case with most of the companies around in the US. They use technology a lot, right?
Mm.
So helped in the process. And again, I can say without any without any feeling of awkwardness that I've been at the right place, the right time right place, the right time kind of thing. I happened to be at JP Morgan at the right time. I happened to be at Automated Securities, that is the other company at that time. So, but if you ask me, around that time, I learned a lot from this company called Automated Securities, where the owner, he was about a 55, 60-year-old Italian man, but the way he was going about building his company, the way he was, motivating people to build this at a small team of 5 to 6 people, and he was, doing other services, but most of the money he was investing in building this app. So it gave you a sense of how the entrepreneurial system works in India, in US, right?
That was Sybase, right?
Sybase, but Sybase was the technology, but the the thing he was building was a trading system, and that gave you insights into how to build systems right
Hmm.
from scratch, right? And it happened to be in the ground floor kind of thing, where you're involved in every operations of building a mission critical application.
And
Gave
then,
me a lot of experience,
hmm,
but more than that, what I learned observing Carl was the way he used to run the company, the way he used to a single man CEO, how he used to take care of his employees, how he used to be very ethical, so these things really got onto you. And before that, when I worked in Wipro, that was in India, I remember observing, it was the initial phases of Wipro, and I was very enamored by Premji, because I used to listen to his town halls, and so I was really impressed by the kind of people like Premji or Karl Lagrasa. So that was what got me into saying, why can't I start something,
right,
right?
right.
And even though I was doing my master's, I didn't complete the degree. I was still have some 30, 40 credits left. So what happened at that time was, and one thing about the US system, which many of us know, is it's an entrepreneurial country, right? If you want to start something, there is no bottlenecks. There's nothing like you have to be from here or there. Anybody can start a company. Anybody can register a company in a day. You can start working within 1 or 2 days. You don't have the long drawn process which used to happen in India. Start a
Right,
company, right? So it was just registering a Delaware corporation and start,
right.
right? So that is what helped me. You know, I'm thinking I'm giving you a long drawn answer. I don't know if you want me to break it up, but the thing which helped me at that time was to observing these people is why can't I start something on my own, even though I didn't come from that background.
So very interesting. So in your initial days, Vank, you worked with a startup and that was grounds up. And then you also moved to very large enterprises, right? And you got the experience mix of both, with wherein a startup would work grounds up and wherein you are supposed to do everything and you are learning. One day you are a sales guy, one day you are a tech guy, one day you are a finance guy, you're working closely with the founder. And then you get into the large organization wherein everything is systemized. There is a org chart and
Yeah.
they have the KRA, KPIs. So it's a very, very interesting experience you had. And then what happened after that? I think you started Nuware in US after which year it was that?
Yeah. So I started Nuware again. So I was coming down to the story. So JP Morgan was an area where I was a consultant.
Hmm.
JP Morgan, a Sybase consultant. So I used to be billed at a very high rate,
Right.
right, to JP Morgan. And what I find was that was the initial phase of the Indian IT companies,
Hmm.
like the Infosys and Wipro. I think around the 90s is when they really boomeranged.
Right. Right. Right.
So I used to observe them. I used to see how they were growing,
Hmm.
leaps and bounds in those days, right? And so I was really impressed by the fact that these were a bunch of guys from India talking about outsourcing to India work. They never even thought about setting something in US. They said we can do the work from India. In fact, in those days, they used to send floppy disks between India and US. So I was really observing that, and I said, if this is the model, right? Why can't I start something similar, but with a very niche focus,
Hmm.
right? With a niche focus on financial services, because over the period of 5, 6 years I'd worked in the US, this was around 95, 96. I thought that the experience I had gained and observing Carl Lagrassa's how he used to run a company, I thought that, why not start something small?
Mm,
But since my background was Sybase, because Sybase was, even though for a person from India, Sybase is very easy to learn. But
mm,
in US, it was like people used to think, oh, Sybase was like something which was not very easy, right? Because they had created that hype, right? They had created that hype about stored procedures, those kind of stuff, which they thought needed a lot of experience, right? So that helped me, and I thought, maybe I should start something on my own with a clear vision that I cannot be like an Infosys or a Wipro. I wanted to be more small. And in fact,
very,
I remember saying to some of my people whom I try to hire, in fact, three of them, the co-founders or people who started with me, are still in my company today after 30 years. I told them I don't want to be a more than 1,000 people company,
mm,
right? I want to be under 1,000 because one thing is I want to keep that smallness, nimbleness, and let's all get into it. Let's all be technology focused, right? So, and I think that was a vision, and we said we'll only work directly with customers. We will not subcontract because there are a lot of companies used to take business from one and give it to other, and they are the friend. When I said we won't do that, we created a set of policies, a set of framework, and said these are the things we'll follow, right? So the way it worked is I luckily happened to meet two gentlemen who are still with me in a tennis court in 95. So I was really, they were just fresh out of college from masters and I was really impressed with the both of them. I said, why don't you join me? I'm thinking of starting this uh, company. I don't know what it is, but I'm thinking of starting. So I still remember talking to them, and they were very excited because they were looking for jobs. They said, "What? Nothing better than this." So what happened? Ended up having is I used to go to JP Morgan. I used to get up in the morning, 6 a.m., take a bus, go to JP Morgan, right? Do my work there. Parallelly, have these two guys set up an office in a place where we used to live. It's called Sayreville, and then I would manage them remotely. They will do all the work, right? Because the billing which I was getting from JP Morgan is what can sustain me to run this company, right? So, but I think what we entered into was we didn't want to be a services play. We said we are going to do training, right? So the first thing which came to mind was Sybase training.
mm.
We started as a Sybase training center always on the weekends because weekdays people are so we started as a Sybase training center in the city we used to live. It's called Sayreville. And we started doing this training every weekend. So Saturdays, Sundays, when majority of the people came. And I used to do the work in during up to Fridays, help them get customers. And that's how we started, right? So we
Mm.
became a Sybase training center. We said we need to have our own manuals all so we in fact I know an interesting story. We didn't want to do like others where copying some software, so we went and bought Sybase software
Wow.
uh, to do the training, right? Because we wanted to be an authentic thing. So I still remember I had like $28,000 in my account as savings all during my work. I said, let's buy this. It was about 40,000 Sybase server, but I think with discount we got it for 30. So we got the Sybase software. We got a lot of Sun Microsystem mini computers, and we set it up in my office and started training. And I never expected it was pretty good that a lot of people started coming in because everybody wanted to learn about database and in particular Sybase,
Mm,
especially in New York, New Jersey area. It was always most of the financial services were using Sybase,
mm.
right? If you ask any company, be it Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, Lehman Brothers, everybody was buying Sybase because according to industry estimates, Sybase was the fastest database provider in those days.
Right.
So,
Right.
so that's how it started. So we started doing training,
And this
right?
was 1995, 96, right?
96, I think, 96, 90, yeah, around 96. So, and so pretty soon we had a fully packed classes. And each we were charging about $1,500. So in the weekend it was packed. And we got some good training instructors. In fact, I used to teach, but I was not good at teaching. So I got somebody else to teach. I was running the company. So then I got another lady, I still remember, named Sandy, and she was my person who was helping in sales. And these two gentlemen who used to work with me, they used to do the running around and all that. So pretty soon we had packed classes every weekend, right? So one thing led to another. I still remember one weekend we made about $30,000 in. So that was how it started, right?
Right.
But pretty soon we were doing sea training. We were doing different kinds of training within that same facility. So then I think staying in JP Morgan, I had developed a lot of relationships, a lot of contacts. So I went, because I was sent through Sybase to different companies, I had good relationships. So then I started going to the managers whom I knew, or calling them and saying, I can develop your product. We don't want to be like a people providing you bodies. We would like to do this development within our center, come and do it. But they were all used to a model where you send your people to work for them, right? You
Right.
don't, you don't do it. But I was trying to fight that. I wanted so we got a couple of projects, because that is where our, uh, you know, longevity will be, right? If I
Mm.
can use our leverage to develop something. So, but pretty soon I found that we had, at least out of the 20 big firms in finance, we had about 6 or 7 of them as our customers,
Wow.
looking for domain expertise and Sybase and those kind of knowledge. So that's how it started, and then it rolled on from there.
Great. I think that's a great story. Again, grounds up story. And then what happened after that? You came back to India sometime in 2015, if I'm
No,
correct.
so that is what happened is, so we were not doing any offshoring. We were
Hmm.
only purely on-site development,
Right.
right? Uh, then I think in 2000 is when the offshore wave started in a big way. And before that, there was the dot-com boom, 2000, right? Even we were, this is an interesting story which you would find very interesting is the mayor of the city, the town where we were
Hmm.
placed, he was going through my office. He saw the board software development. He came in and he said, I have this interesting thing where I want to develop something for my township, right? Because at that time, even everything was going online, right? If you remember the dot-com boom, right?
Hmm.
If you just put .com, you used to get funding, in those days, right? So he came into my office and he said, see, I have this requirement for my township where people can apply for permits, licenses. They'll have to come in the morning, stand in line. Why can't we make it online, right? And I know the whole requirement. So I thought there was a unique opportunity, because there are over, if you look at US, there are, I would say, 7,000, 8,000 townships, right? And in New Jersey itself, there's about 400, 500 townships. So we said, why not get into this bandwagon? So during the weekdays, we had a lot of bandwidth. So we started developing that software.
Hmm.
In fact, there was another gentleman who had a software which was based of DOS kind of operating system. So we developed it using client server, and pretty soon we had 40 customers who
And
was
this
using
was government Excel, right? GOV.
GovXcel. It's called GovXcel.
Hmm.
And then I went and looked for funding. Within 2 days, I got funding of $3-4 million.
One thing which I really, really see, which is very interesting, is that you are always focused in creating IPs.
That was what I was always trying to do, trying to get away from a pure services kind of
Right.
landscape, because that was not challenging to me, right?
Hmm.
So then GovXcel suddenly we had over 40, 50 customers, and Investco Private Capital, headed by Parag Saxena, they invested in us. There is a gentleman by name Bill Campbell, who used to be the former CEO of Bank One, former CEO of Philip Morris. He was part of this fund. He came. So we started, and pretty soon, we had a lot of customers, and there was a company which was just focused on governments who
Right.
acquired us. So that was my first exit, right? Because I couldn't run both. I couldn't do GovXcel and Nuware
Hmm.
at the same time, because Nuware also was growing
Hmm.
very fast pace at that time. So that's how GovXcel happened. So in 2000 is when I said, maybe I should also look at offshoring, because companies are not willing to pay the
Hmm.
kind of money we were billing at $150 an hour, or companies are saying, I don't need to pay so much, right? So I said, if we are not in the offshore wave in those days, we are going to be out of business.
We will not be competitive on
We'll be
rates.
very competitive. So that is when I thought about offshoring. And luckily for me, around that time, I met Prashant Prakash, who is the founder now of Accel here.
Mm.
Prashant used to run a company called Netcraft in those days in India. So kind of met Prashant and I said, Prashant, I have this idea to start something in India. Can you help me? So it just happened that I invested in Netcraft from a private and then I started learning the ropes of offshore and
Mm.
eventually, started an offshore center in 2004 or 5, right? And it was with Prashant's help we started it, and eventually Netcraft got sold. So we bought all the businesses we had, we took it over, and that's how the offshore story started. But even in the offshore, we try our best to be not led by number of people, led
Mm.
by the value we are creating to the customer, right? We do not want to go to a customer and say, I'll pay you, your QA guys are $20 an hour. We don't want to do that. We said we are going to be experts with domain knowledge. We want to add value, right? So our rates are not going to be as competitive as many of the other companies you deal with. So it just happened and we started, and one thing led to another. We got a lot of customers in the US who wanted to work with us. It's a different model. It's a hybrid model, which is mainly combination of an on-site versus offshore, right? We used to have like a lot of good on-site domain experts working with offshore resources. So that's how the model started.
And this was sometime 2005. And then you came back in 2015 to start your own
Yeah,
firm, right? What
No, I
happened?
think I came back. I moved my family around 2007,
Okay.
right? But mostly I was focused on Nuware initially.
Mm.
So we had to build a team, right? We had to
Right.
build. So once that happened, then I think I was always interested in helping the entrepreneurial system in India, and that is when the Prashant and Subrato and others had started
Mm.
Excel and Erasmic. Prior to that, I was part of that fund. So, but I was always interested in helping entrepreneurs. So way back in 2005 was when Dheeraj Rajaram, I don't know if you ever know that, he's the founder of Mu Sigma. I
Mm-hmm.
happened to meet Dheeraj in the US in one of the conferences, and he was telling me about his idea about data analytics, right? In building a data analytics firm from India. And he had a lot of interest in that because if you remember, data analytics as an industry became big around the 2007, 2008,
Right,
right?
right, right.
Right. So I told Dheeraj that I can help him, but I would like to invest my money. So that is how right around 2006, I think, is when I invested with Dheeraj. And that was my first foray into venture investment, right?
Mm.
So, but that nobody knew. Dheeraj became a huge success. It became a unicorn very fast. I
Right,
think the first unicorn by 2012, they were a unicorn.
right, right.
Very good business. So, and around the same time is when I said, okay, maybe I should dabble with venture capital.
Mm.
Then I invested, I think I still remember Acko founder, Varun
Mm.
Dua. I
Mm.
met, there is another company called Daily Ninja, just
Mm.
was with Pilani guys. They were doing something similar to BigBasket. So BigBasket acquired them. So we got into BigBasket. So a slew of investments I did around that time, right? Basically from a personal money, right? But then I think in 2015 is when I really thought about putting it as a fund,
Right.
right? So we called it NuVentures. So today we are a $75 million fund, and we invest in early stage startups, but mostly focused on SaaS and AI. But we also invest in consumer wherever we find it.
Mm-hmm.
So that is my investment story.
No, I think this is very interesting. And let me summarize till now what we have spoken from US journey to setting up a startup to setting up a government startup and then exiting and then coming back to India, investing. And I think one thing which I really saw in your kind of investment, because you invested in Acko, you invested in BigBasket. I think somewhere I feel that more than business model, you actually back startups and founders,
Right.
because I see you are sector agnostic. You invest in consumer, you invest in technology, you invest in other kind of businesses also. But what I liked is that the kind of founders you have backed, right? So, and then you created your own fund. But tell me something, wanted to ask very interesting aspects in terms of the classic case in terms of how do you build a business, right? You nurture your current network, you build a team, you retain your people, you go all out, you work on weekends, you are ethical, you build grounds up and then raise capital, right? You don't flow with the thing, you build it slowly and then get into it. What's happening in the currently in the startup ecosystem in India? Now we come back to what's happening currently in India and where do you see India? Because you said something which was very, very interesting that Sybase was a big thing for people in US, but Indian tech and Indian founders and Indian tech companies could easily do it, build it, right? So Indian tech founders and Indian as a tech uh, technopreneurs in that sense have done very well in US, right? And it's a story which we all know, right? So what has made them so successful in US, right? And learning from that in India where we are now, what is your thought process in terms of where we are now in India? Why I'm saying this, just to add, because you have worked very hard in creating IPs, and somewhere I think the IP creation is still very low in India, right? So yeah.
No, I think to be very honest with you, in fact, I was at an Economic Times event today morning. They asked me the same question. I feel India, right from the early days, especially after the Indian economy was opened up by Manmohan Singh, I think we had the services kind of approach, right?
Mm.
In fact, if you look at our history, if you look at Wipros of the world in the 80s or Infosys in the 80s, they were all into services, right? It was about, to a large extent, the labor arbitrage, right? They were
Mm.
trying to say that we could do this much cheaper in India, much better. It is not just quantity of people; it's the quality of work,
Right.
right? Because we were producing so many engineers coming out of engineering colleges. Where will they go, right? We didn't have the product mindset. Whereas if we compare that to US, from the very beginning, their mindset was products, right? They were building services around their products, right? But they had a good product. Like if you look at Microsoft or all these companies, right? Whereas India, from the very beginning, it was mostly services oriented, right?
But tell me something. Yeah.
Uh,
Please continue.
so what my understanding in those days was India is going to be the engine for driving growth, right? At a lower cost, right? But all the innovation is going to happen outside, right? In fact, I remember working for Premji in Wipro systems. They were trying to create a spreadsheet similar to Excel in
Mhm.
those days, right? I think in the early 90s, but they were nowhere successful, right? Even though their product was much better, because I realized that marketing is our biggest problem sitting in India, right? You may create more like great products, but where are you going to sell, right? If you don't have the marketing engine, right? So that is why US companies are so successful. They put marketing above anything else, right? They know how to build brands. They right. If you look at any of the brands, which are everything is from the US, because they know how to build brands. They know brands sell, right? Whereas India is more, from a very beginning, we were a doer kind of economy, right? You tell me what to do, we'll do, right?
So, what you're saying is that we have the talent, we have the knowledge, but we do not have the market access and the marketing expertise to go and do it. So because somewhere the actual consumers or the investors for these kind of products, which will take little more time to build and then monetize, is in US, right? So how do you bridge that gap? And because somewhere China has kind of transited, even China also started with becoming a back office manufacturing for most of the world. But now if you see, China is not only for lower cost, but for technology also, what kind of technology they have built in manufacturing. So do you think that that transition will ultimately happen in India also, or you feel that India will continue to build and the inventions will happen outside
No,
India?
I think things are changing to a large extent. I think the product mindset is happening. I think the first one of the best product mindset is Freshworks, if you look at it,
Mm,
but again,
mm,
based on startup, based on funding, right? Venture
mm,
capital. But I would say that there's less effort in India because if you look at the success of our IT services companies, right? Be it Wipro, be it any of them. In
mm.
fact, I think last count, there were about 500 or 600 IT services companies, all
Right.
in the US market, and everybody is growing, right?
Mm,
So what I find about us is we are very good at doing our work. We are
mm.
not good at, thinking and saying, okay, this is a product, right? How do I go? But marketing is the biggest challenge we have. One, India is not a market for any of these products,
I
right?
agree.
Right? But we have to sell it in the US. And
Mm,
in US, you have to be native, right? You
mm.
cannot go there and say that I'm from India, so my product is no, right?
You
So
have to be on there on ground and do it.
yeah, so your GTM has to be there, right?
Mm,
So even if I remember when I remember Wipro's, they were building something similar to Lotus 123 and Excel, fantastic product, but they didn't have the market, right? As soon as they say we are from India, people never used to buy, right? That is, I think that is there. But they like our people. They like the fact that Indian engineers, Indian software engineers are one of the best in the world, right? Because of the kind of education system we had,
mm.
right? It focuses a lot on mathematics. It focuses a lot on, solving problems, using software and all that. So that is, so I'm saying today, and I was very enthused way back in 2006 when I came back, when I saw the startup ecosystem starting to flourish, right? A lot of companies, getting invested. But if you look at majority of the companies which were getting invested were consumer brands, be it Acko. Mu Sigma was one company, but it was again in the services space, but maybe more high-end consulting. So I found that, the thing that our I'm sorry, I'm forgetting my thought process here. Especially with the D2C brands, right?
Mm.
We had a lot of them, right? In fact, I was part of, I knew the Erasmic guys and Accel guys very well. I never expected that Flipkart, if you really look at Flipkart, if you dig the layers, Flipkart is another Amazon
Mm.
company, right? The founders of Flipkart were from Amazon, right? But they executed better. Or Ola, for example, came in. Ola was a pure play similar to Uber,
Super. Yeah.
right? Even though nobody claims that. So
Mm.
we were good at copying and doing it better.
Mm.
Right? So that was the mindset, and that is because of the services mindset we had from the very beginning, right? I know I have heard this many times. HCL and others tried to get into the chips business in those days, but they were never successful because the fact remained that services is the easiest revenue, right? There's not much of risk, right? You have a cash flow business where you're giving a product, you're getting paid for that on an hourly basis.
How can we
Right?
change that, Venk?
Huh?
How can we change that?
No, I think it is
Because
slowly changing, right? But it'll
because I
take
just
time.
I just add one layer to this, because all these software companies, you know what's happening in the software companies now, and their market cap is going down in India
Hmm.
because everyone is worried about the AI impact and automation impact on this offshore companies now. And no one knows what will happen in future. The best part is that everyone is worried and no one knows what will happen. In fact, till today, no one knows what will be the real impact of AI on us, right? So if we do not invent at that pace and we continue to be dependent on service and continue to be the back office for global companies, and if AI comes in, uh, I know some hypothesis says that these companies, because there will be a lot of automation implementation which companies would require, so these companies will actually help in doing that too. but still, I think the kind of employment which we need to generate, it seems little difficult to me. I mean, how would we path go to that road?
No, I think what you're saying is very true. Without doubt, AI has put a very big question mark on all the services companies, especially who are hiring fresh graduates out of colleges, right? I think today, if you look at it, many companies are shying away from hiring freshers, fresh graduates, right? So I don't know if you ask me, like I said, jury's still out. I don't know where this is going to lead
Hmm.
because we can be good at services, right? But eventually we will have to become a product nation if we want to get to that level, right? Even if you look at China, you were talking about China earlier, right? China made big investments in AI,
Hmm.
right? They knew that they had to, if they had to compete with the US, they have AI is one of the easiest one to do, right? So they invested a lot of capital very early in AI, right? Camera phone, cameras, vision based technologies, and those. In fact, they're so ahead of even the US in some of these, right?
Hmm.
Because they realized that they had to invest in AI, right? India, I think missed the bus to some extent, right?
Hmm.
We did not invest in developing models, which are very crucial for AI. Now we are getting into with Sarvam and others, we are trying, but I think the story is already told, right?
Hmm.
So we as a country, even our startup founders, right? When I look at startups today, they're just using wrappers around a chat GPT or a Gemini or whatever, right? We aren't creating the basic AI infrastructure yet, right? And with compute becoming the biggest challenge as we go
Right.
along, I think India is going to have to do something. In fact, I was at a conference the other day, I said the same thing. India has to give tokens free of cost. The government has to give tokens to people to develop, right? Even everybody talks about applications. Yes, one thing India has is knowledge of applications, domain, right? But if you don't figure out a way to use AI models, right? Or to create our own, and that requires a lot of infrastructure, right? Because bandwidth, once again, with cloud, you cannot sit in India and develop all these big models, right? Because it requires a lot of throughput and a lot of bandwidth. So I think my gut is that we are at the cusp today where, even in my company, Nuware, we are transitioning our whole industry to match with the AI wave, right? So we have done a lot of investments in developing people using AI, Python training and all that, because it's the next wave, right? So if you ask me, I don't know. If you ask me where is it going, I have no idea, right? I don't think anybody will fathom to say they know where it's going, right? And I think even our venture capitals are struggling to a large extent because there's no path-breaking companies coming out of India in AI, right? We
Hmm.
are good at D2C, right? We are good at direct to consumer. We are good at retail. Absolutely good, right? I don't know. I can't take a guess. How many product companies have come out and done well? I don't know. Maybe one or two, maybe three, right? But services is where we are still looked on as a country. Like when Anthropic came to India or OpenAI came, they got into a partnership with an Infosys or a Wipro or whatever it is. So, but again, they're going to train their people in usage of their models, right? We are not going to be doing something unique in that.
So, if I can just ask you three things which India can do to get into the IP mindset and product mindset, which can change and which can help us to build India in next 2 decades, what would be those 3 points? And just to add to that, do you think that because government needs to play a big role in this in terms of R&D, infrastructure, and I think funding. So, what is your thought in terms of what India can do?
No, I think first thing is we have to increase our investment in infrastructure, right? We need to make sure that our engineers have enough compute power to do things, right? Which is the need of the hour, right? Compute and building those warehouses or whatever you call that. to keep your servers is very important, right? So that is one thing. Second thing is to get our people more and more aware of what's happening in AI, right? We need to, I don't know if it's the governments, but we need to figure out how to train our people on knowledge, right? If you ask me, the third thing is, more and more investments going into uh, entrepreneurs who are building path-breaking companies. There's a huge risk, right? How can maybe it's a combination of government and others. I keep hearing 10,000 crore fund and this and that, but we need to fund our uh, companies, right? Without worry that will it be successful or not. Because see, today, even our VCs, right? Many of them have been very successful with the D2C model.
Right.
Right? You invest, and many of them have done well, be it Mama, be it any of that, right? But in the AI landscape, it's obviously infrastructure is a key, right? Training is very important of our people, right? And also, can the government be involved in funding some of these startups too, right? In a much open way rather than through, thing that I can't think of anything else. And I think our mindset has to change from a services kind of, at least at the younger level, right? We need, because we are all used to getting quick money, right? I keep saying this. If you look at the services industry, you do something, you get paid immediately, right? Whereas in a product, it is, you sell the product, there's a lot of life cycle, right? So I think how can we change that is very important, because more and more I find that white collar jobs, right, are going to be in an issue as we go along.
And what is the one message you have for the founders when we talk about deep tech and AI, what they should do and how they can change their mindset?
No, I think and it's easy for me to say this because I know if I'm in their shoes, it's difficult.
Hmm.
How do you find those innovative ideas, right? How can we find something path breaking which others haven't done, right? I would think our founders have to, do a lot of research, right? Because there are areas still that is out there which need solution,
Right.
right? But even our founders are always looking at quick results, right? They're looking at a D2C brand. How can I use AI maybe to increase performance? But that's going to be not a mode anymore, right?
Hmm.
So I think my feeling when I talk to startup founders today, right? I meet many startup founders. I have not yet seen path-breaking ideas coming out of here, right? If there's one or two, they talk about couple of emergent and others. But for one company here, there are 20 companies in the US who are doing
Right.
similar things, right? And our market continues to be the US
Right.
or the Europe, right? We do not have that kind of need, right? We have to sell to Western nations, Europe, those kind of countries, right? So because we don't have a market in India.
Right. Right. Right.
And GTM is going to be a big challenge. How are they going to overcome that? Do I sit in the US? Do I sit here? Right? No longer will sitting here and selling in the US will work, right? So I think we should get away from this hype about building foundation models,
Hmm.
right? I think everybody talks about, we didn't have, I think the game is over there. Foundation models has been built, right? No longer is it that language-based foundation models will work, right?
Right.
If you look at Gemini, they can answer any questions in any language.
Hmm. Right. Thanks for that. And I think the last thing I want to touch upon before we end is you are also a great community builder, right? And you are currently heading TIE Bangalore. Uh, Tell me what hasn't been done in last 25 years, which we can do now to help the Bangalore ecosystem. I just love Bangalore ecosystem. I have worked in Bangalore. It was in fact in 2004 when I just first went to Bangalore. That was my first job after clearing CA, and I joined EY, and then I worked with KPMG, and then I started Tax Mantra Global. So I just love that city, and but what can we do more now you there and you are actually leading it, right?
No, I think one of the reasons I got interested in Thai Bangalore is it was a platform which is existing, right? And they needed somebody to who can roll up his sleeves and help them, right?
Right.
I thought, let me try. I don't know if I'll be successful, because we have to give back to the ecosystem. Even though I may say that India doesn't have this, this is my motherland, right? Whatever you
Mm.
say, even I can be the most successful in the US, but doing something for India gives us the most satisfaction, right?
Right.
I would say that with even somebody like a Sundar Pichai or a Satya, they all talk about how they can help India, right?
Mm.
And I thought that we had a platform like Thai which main motive is to help entrepreneurs, right? How can we get into them the ideas, or how can we develop some of their ideas, give them good mentorship, right? Can we help them take them to the US market, right? So I think it's still very early,
Mm.
right? For till 2 years back, everything was about India's startup ecosystem. There were unicorns every day coming out, right? I don't know how many unicorns have you seen in the last 3 4 months, right?
Mm.
Because it was mainly the D2C space. This is a consumer space, right? Other than one Freshworks,
Mm.
right? But even today, they are under Freshworks is under the same pressure of uh, any other company. So I think Thai Bangalore has a good position to help entrepreneurs, and that is what challenged me, wanting me to get interested in helping. Right, organize good events where people come and give proper uh, guidance.
Mm.
Right, like we had this D2C event last week. Right, it
Right.
was a huge
Right.
success. I don't know if you heard about it,
No, no,
but
I know
we
that.
had over 230 people.
Yeah.
Right, all paid
Mm.
because we had very good speakers who came and gave their and venture capitalists who came and told what we should be looking for.
Right. Thanks, Venk, for this. And I think I will not take much of your time and will continue to support being part of Thai Bangalore also and part of the same community. And we all hope that our mother country, India, becomes big. I think I'm very sure that consumption will take us from 4.2 trillion to 8 trillion. I was just reading a report which was launched by Pranab Pai, the consumption industry, the consumption story. And I think
Mhm.
on that path, we have to also build and invest into R&D and continue to do that. I think
Mhm.
that is what I feel for the next 10 years. But
Mhm.
thanks. It was lovely chatting with you, so insightful. And I think you are the
So
true.
see, one thing which I would like to leave you with the thought, we
Mm.
all talk about VC industry, but you have to say that they have a 10-year cycle or 10-year window, right?
Mm.
I
Mm.
think AI will need much more longer, 20 25 years for us to get to that level. Because
Right,
all countries like China or US are way ahead, right?
right.
So we need long-term venture capitalists. If you ask me, one more thing is we need venture capitalists who are willing to support, and that only can come from the government.
I was about to say that the government really needs to put in now and actually walk the talk.
Yeah.
So thanks for this. Thanks for this. I really enjoyed the discussion and we will meet soon, face
Yeah.
to face. But thanks for this today. Thank you.
Thank you.